Hey everybody, it is You Had to Ask, the show where I answer your questions. And this week, my first question comes from Troubleshooter125, who says, I seem to be on a journalism kick lately, so bear with me, Steve. What's happened with 60 Minutes? Seems there was a time when they were the investigative news show, and second wasn't even close. I'd swear that I heard them break the first news I ever heard about the Catholic Church child abuse scandal back in the mid-70s, never mind hundreds of other cutting-edge stories. Now they still do good work, but there's nowhere near the same frequency of uncovering the big story that there used to be. I suspect the answer is the advent of cable news and everything that came along with that, though the death of Mike Wallace was a substantial loss, but I'd still like to hear your thoughts. It's probably a whole host of factors that are responsible for the decline of 60 Minutes and of hard-hitting investigative journalism in general, but if I had to single out one thing, it would be when TV networks decided that their news divisions had to be profitable. They started treating their news divisions not as a public service, not as something that they provided to the public as a duty or a responsibility, but it was part of their corporation that had to make money for them. And so you had shows like 60 Minutes that started to really worry about what the rating was on their show. And the ironic thing is, in its heyday, 60 Minutes was a ratings powerhouse. And it's still a pretty reliably highly rated show. But back in its heyday, when it had that reputation as the place to go to watch the news and see the important stories investigated, it had high ratings just for that reason, because it had a reputation as a serious, reliable news source. And when news became not a duty, not about journalism and informing the public and telling the truth, when all of that became secondary to making money, I think that was a big part of the decline of serious news. And yeah, sure, cable news is part of that. The sort of deconstruction of the news into a 24-hour cycle where instead of reporting on a story and coming up with a comprehensive take on it and sharing it with people over the course of an hour on TV or in a newspaper in a well-written article, you're basically just telling people what you know as you find it out in dribs and drabs, and the news becomes much more scattershot and superficial and repetitive and trashy as a result, because you're always trying to grab people's attention instead of trying to inform them in a responsible way. That all has something to do with it, I'm sure, but that notion, that change in priorities from news as a public service to news as a profit-making enterprise, I think was incredibly damaging to 60 Minutes and to serious journalism in general. David Edwards, what are your thoughts on gore porn? Some I found interesting because of the characters and plot twists, e.g. Saw, but most is just a waste of time. Human Centipede, Hostel, Irreversible, and Audition come to mind. These movies that you mentioned that are famous for being unsettling or gross or really gory, really violent, or you have this really lurid sensibility about how they depict violence and death and horror. It seems to me that anybody could do that. It's not a style that I think requires a lot of skill and a lot of artistry. And to me, a great horror movie is a movie that builds suspense. A horror movie is not that different from a suspense movie in that you are building on an audience's fear and their anticipation. The fear in a horror movie, at least to my taste, the fear to the type of a horror movie that I like, the thing that makes a horror movie really scary to me, is when you're not scared of what's happening on the screen right now. You're scared of what you think is going to happen any moment. And that takes a lot of skill and a lot of finesse and a lot of style to lead an audience to that point where you're really feeling that tension and that uncertainty about, what's going to happen next? And then to exploit that and fulfill that in an artful and creative way. That takes skill. And there's more to it than just making the grossest, most disgusting, gruesome movie that you can imagine. Seth Topper You seem to state injudicious accolades against men. You yourself have waged pretty heavy-handed against the formation of men having a rights movement to counter whatever discrepancies there may be in the admonishment of men and to placate that verbal dissidence that has been levied against them by the women's rights group, 1848 until current. That's 167 years of women trying and having a women's right group with no men's right group to counter or echo back their position. I do feel an undercurrent of men's rights activism. I have surmised my question from your caution against a men's rights group. Why is it not prudent to have the foundation of a men's rights group? Well, because men as a group are not oppressed. It's as simple as that. It doesn't mean that there are not men who are oppressed. Men can suffer from oppression and disadvantagement and being underprivileged, just the same as women. Men can suffer from poverty, men can suffer from racism, men can suffer from all sorts of forms of discrimination and inequality, but men are not discriminated against and do not suffer because they are men. And women are discriminated against and do face inequality and injustice and oppression because they are women. Still to this day, despite the great strides that have been made thanks to the feminist movement, 167 years as you measure it. So there is still inequality that women face because they are women. That is why there is still a need for a women's rights group, a feminist group. That is how we achieve gender equality. You attain equality by elevating, by lifting up the underprivileged group. Women, in terms of sex, in terms of gender, women are the underprivileged group. You lift them up and you get closer and closer to gender equality. And that, to me, should be the goal in terms of gender relations. You want equality. You want fairness. And men are not oppressed. So they don't need a rights group. Women are, and they do. And I really don't know how much more simply I can state it. Rockin' Rob 210. Hi Steve, big fan of your channel. I watch every episode, every week. You're always something that I look forward to. I saw that you did some horror movies reviews, in particular Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead. However, I felt dismayed that you overlooked Day of the Dead. Mind you, I'm talking about the 1985 movie, not that piece of shit straight-to-DVD remake that came out in 2007. Day of the Dead is one of my all-time favorite movies, and it is by far the darkest of the three Romero zombie movies. Could you give me a brief review or opinion of the movie? Did you like it? Did you hate it? What are your thoughts on that film? Well, first of all, the reason that I didn't review it as a part of that series of movie reviews is the theme for that week of movie reviews. Those were my annual Halloween movie reviews, my monster movie reviews that I do every year the week of Halloween. And the theme was zombie movies. So I did Romero's Night of the Living Dead, and I did Romero's Dawn of the Dead, and then I also did White Zombie and Return of the Living Dead and 28 Days Later. Those were my 5 movies that I chose. And Day of the Dead just didn't make the cut. It wasn't that I don't like that movie. I do. I like Day of the Dead very much. It's just I wanted to review a wider range, a more diverse set of zombie movies than just do a bunch of Romero movies. Although, I mean, I think Romero's zombie movies are the best ones. I love that original trilogy of Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Day of the Dead. I do think, I have to say, even though I agree with you that it's the darkest, and I do think that it is an excellent film, and it does certain things that the other two, the first 2 Romero zombie movies don't do. And it takes things in a different direction, and it explores some really interesting things, like the stuff they do with the pet zombie that they have, and sort of getting at these questions of what is a zombie, and can they be taught? Are they still people in some sense? Which is a really kind of revolutionary idea, considering that the first 2 movies have been all about killing them and trying to eradicate them and escape from their clutches. To think that they might actually still be people in some sense in there is really a really intriguing idea to introduce into the series at that point. But I don't think it's as good overall as a film as either Night of the Living Dead or Dawn of the Dead. That's just my opinion. I still think Day of the Dead is a great movie. It's a really awesome horror movie. It is not like the horror movies I was just mentioning in an earlier question that David asked. I think it does have some ideas behind it. It does have some thought. It does have interests in social commentary and revealing character, and as all of Romero's best horror work does, it uses the horror story to tell us something about ourselves, to make an artistic statement about humanity and society, and Day of the Dead certainly does that. So no, I think Day of the Dead is a terrific movie. The reason I didn't review it as a part of those reviews was not because I had anything against the movie at all. I think it's a really, really good movie. Jack McMorrow, what do you admire most about religions, particularly Christianity? For me, it has to be usurping other more well-established beliefs, such as paganism, to popularize their own beliefs. For example, moving their main feast day to December 25th to effectively leech off of the pagan winter solstice. Kind of like Vinnie Mac putting Survivor Series on to coincide with Starrcade and threatening networks that they will lose the right to air his content if they show WCW wrestling instead of the aforementioned Survivor Series. I love the fact that you worked a pro wrestling reference into your question about religion and Christianity. You are my kind of person. The highest levels of Christian ethics, the Christian teachings in the New Testament to help the poor, and to love each other, and to forgive each other, and to be compassionate and open and forgiving and charitable. I think those are really, really powerful and really, really admirable ethics. Those to me are by far the most admirable things about Christianity. And I want to make it clear that they are not unique to Christianity. I'm not saying that those qualities are only found in Christianity or were first created in Christianity. That's certainly not the case. Christianity simply picked up these really basic elements of human morality and the positive aspects of human nature and made them into something of its own. But nonetheless, that is a part of Christianity. And I think Christians and Christianity is never more beautiful and useful and noble than when it is making it about helping the less fortunate. The Jesus stuff, the God stuff, salvation. I know for many Christians, it's all about that. It's all about saving your soul and sharing the good news with people. But there are lots of Christians for whom that isn't really as important as the call that they feel, which they believe comes from God or the Holy Spirit or whatever, but they feel called to help people, to use whatever resources they have, whatever energy they have, to make the lives of other people better in real substantial ways, not just by handing them out Bibles, but by feeding them and clothing them and giving of themselves to them. That to me is a beautiful thing. And you don't have to be a Christian to do that. You don't have to be a Christian to want to do that. But at its very best, I think Christianity can encourage people to do that sort of thing. And I admire that. And I'm grateful for that. And I am happy whenever I see that. Whenever I see that kind of behavior and those kinds of attitudes, whether they are religiously motivated or not. I think that's a really good thing and a really admirable thing. Jared Helbert. Dear Steve, I'm sorry if you've already answered these questions, as I've only seen about half dozen of your You Had to Ask series, but 1, what's your favorite genre of literature? And 2, what are some of your favorite books? P.S. You are my favorite atheist YouTuber because of your sense of humor, your non-shouty, down-to-earth reasonableness, and the fact that you were an English major. You're rad. Well, thank you very much, Jared. I appreciate you saying that. My favorite genre of literature, it's not really a genre. I think I probably would have to just say literary fiction. I have enjoyed, sci-fi. I've enjoyed westerns. I've enjoyed, genre pieces, just as I enjoy genre films very much. But my favorite works are probably things that would be categorized as literary fiction or classics. As far as some of my favorites, I love The Great Gatsby. I think it's a beautifully written book. I love the books of Joseph Conrad. I love Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes stories, especially the short stories. Those are some of my favorites. In terms of nonfiction, I love Carl Sagan. I have read almost all of his books that he ever wrote, and I love them all, especially The Demon-Haunted World. I love Voltaire. I love, that's not really nonfiction. Well, some of Voltaire is nonfiction. Some of, like the Philosophical Dictionary would be nonfiction. But he also wrote satires and stuff. Thomas Paine, my favorite founding father, author of The Age of Reason, still the best refutation of Christianity, I think, that anyone has ever written. So those are some of my favorites. But in terms of genres, it's kind of boring, I guess. Just literary fiction and classics. I don't really hew closely to one particular genre. Joseph Fopiano. Hey Steve, I've been thinking about possibly dabbling in screenwriting, seeing as I'm already minoring in film studies. If next semester goes well, I'll just straight up double major in English and film studies. I'm already confident in my analytical abilities where film criticism is concerned, so I thought I'd make an attempt at focusing on an area where I'm not so confident. Even though I've never written a screenplay, amateur criticism has led me to believe that when crafting a story arc, the story should serve the characters instead of the other way around. Do you agree with this? Can you provide an example in any work of film or television where having the characters serve the story produced certain plot contrivances that led to a decline in quality? You know, I think ideally, story and character should resonate with each other. One should not be totally at the service of the other. They should be at the service of each other. And I think when you say story in this instance, you're probably referring more to plot, are you not? The plot of a story should serve the characters rather than the characters being slaves to the plot. I generally agree with that, but ideally there would be a balance. Actually, I'll tell you a really good example that just popped into my head. It's a terrible movie for lots of reasons, not the least of which is the one I'm going to say, but the movie Armageddon. Big Hollywood blockbuster popcorn movie. A very plot-driven movie. The characters are really only there to hit the particular steps that the formula that the plot is based on require them to hit, you know. And because of that, you never really see, or at least I never really see the characters as being real people. And when the characters get into situations that are meant to evoke strong emotional responses from the audience, I feel manipulated rather than moved and emotional. So that's one of the pitfalls. You would probably, in most films, in most movies that you would write, you would want to evoke some kind of an emotional response at key moments from the audience. And you want that emotional response to feel organic and to feel as though the audience members are genuinely reacting to what is happening in your film, rather than having it pulled out of them by some cynical plot contrivance. I guess it's, as a principle, characters should be served by plot. That's the way I tend to write. Those are the sorts of movies that I tend to respond to the strongest. But you can have a plot-driven film. There's nothing wrong with having a plot-driven film. You can have a great plot-driven film as long as you do it in a way that is skillful enough and elegant enough that the characters aren't just lifeless pawns doing what the plot requires of them, as long as the characters still feel like real people who are making real choices, and as long as the emotions that you attempt to evoke from your audience are evoked in a way that feels genuine and skillful and natural rather than manipulative. That's the worst thing that you can do, is to make a movie that the audience can feel you trying to move them into a certain place. That's really off-putting as an audience member, and that's something that will turn me off of a movie right away if I am conscious of the fact that the filmmaker is trying to move me into a certain place emotionally. It's the mark of an unskilled filmmaker, if you can feel that as an audience member. You know, speaking of plot, speaking of formula, speaking of unskilled, all of those things are about to culminate in the next few minutes, because, as that sound effect signifies, it is time for
the lightning round. Rapid fire questions, glib and adequate answers.
Der Wunderbar Bar, what's your favorite hot dog topping? I just love creme fraiche dressing and cucumber relish. And don't forget ketchup. Gotta have ketchup. I guess I'm kind of dull when it comes to hot dog toppings, as I am with many things. I like ketchup and mustard. I like diced onions and relish. And if it's a really good hot dog, if it's well made, if it's like cooked on a grill and it's plump and juicy with a little bit of crispiness on the outside, I can eat it without any topping. I just like to taste the hot dog. I'm weird like that. Jay Lebrecht, what's your thought on vasectomies? Is it okay to not bring it up that you've had one unless asked? I think you should probably mention it if you are a man in a relationship with a woman and it's really getting serious, like a long-term type of thing, and she has made it clear that she wants to have kids. I think you need to let her know. I think you need to be upfront about the fact that, having kids, having biological kids isn't really an option because you've had a vasectomy. But, I mean, it's nothing that you shouldn't have to wear a t-shirt with it or anything. You shouldn't have to announce it, on the first date or anything like that. Ira Moser, what do you think of men who say we're having a baby? To me, it's like someone bringing eggs to bake a cake, letting someone else bake it, and then saying, we baked a cake. Yeah, I think you're right. Although I don't judge people so harshly who say those sorts of things because they're enthusiastic, prospective fathers and they and their partner are really excited about having a baby, and a guy is just saying that because he's genuinely excited and wants to be a part of the whole process, saying, "Oh, we're having a baby." Like, if it's not meant in any kind of derogatory or selfish way, I don't have a problem with it. If it's just a soon-to-be father expressing his enthusiasm, I don't think there's anything really wrong with it. Randy Owens, can we at least agree that the Dukes of Hazzard movie was a completely awful thing? Also, no love for Cesar Romero, not even enough to mention him as an option. You know what, Randy? You take it up with the person who asked that question about Joker actors, because the only options I was given was Jack Nicholson and Heath Ledger. And I chose from the options I was given. If somebody had mentioned Cesar Romero, I would have considered him. But since he wasn't mentioned, I didn't consider him. I was just doing my job. And you're right, yeah, the Dukes of Hazzard movie was terrible. Radical Bacon. Hey, Steve, so is empathy hard or easy? Yes. That's really a scumbag answer, isn't it? Depending on the situation, it should be easy, but it can be hard because in addition to being naturally empathetic, we are also naturally selfish and biased and fucked up in all kinds of different ways. So it can be very hard sometimes, but ideally it's easy. And even when it is hard, I think we should strive for it. I think we're better that way. Lucas Hackett, One Angry Brony. Hey Steve, the fans need to know this, but what was absolutely the worst movie you have ever seen and why? For me, it was the god-awful 1997 film Batman and Robin. What about you? Yeah, Batman and Robin was my least favorite for a long time. I really, really don't like Armageddon that I mentioned earlier in answer to Joseph's question. I really, really don't like Batman and Robin. I really, really don't like Star Wars Episode 2. Love Story. I hate that movie. Talk about feeling manipulated. Those are probably the top contenders at any given moment for my least favorite movie, for a movie that I really, really just hate. Ateo Amable, excellent Spanish pronunciation. Now let me ask you this. Who do you think is the most influential of the four horsemen of the New Atheism? Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, the late Christopher Hitchens, and Daniel Dennett. And why? Well, to me personally, it would be Hitchens. I think Hitchens meant the most to me as a writer and a thinker when it came to atheism. But probably Dawkins. I think overall it would probably be Dawkins. He, because of the success of the God Delusion and because of his pre-existing prominence as a scientist, I think he's just the most famous, the most visible of the four horsemen. So I think probably him. He's the most influential. He's the one who, for better and for worse, has sort of set the tone and defined the public image of New Atheism. Daniel Horton, Steve, another lightning round question. What are your thoughts on WWE versus TNA? I'm pretty much completely new to wrestling, and I'm trying to get an idea of some of the best stuff out there to start with. Thanks. Well, I'm not a good one to ask about TNA because I haven't watched much of it since like 2005, 2006. I watched TNA seriously when Kurt Angle first came in and they were running Kurt Angle and Samoa Joe on top. I thought those matches were great. I thought some of the tag team matches back then were great. I thought the women's division in that general time frame was really good, but then it really kind of trailed off in terms of quality and I stopped watching it. So I'm mostly, in terms of wrestling now, I'm mostly a WWE guy. And really, most especially an NXT guy. I think WWE's developmental show, NXT, is the best American wrestling there is right now. So that's what I would recommend to you. NXT. NH5316. Hey Steve, I just watched the Batman vs. Superman Comic-Con trailer. It looks like Superman is going to be held accountable for monumental carnage at the end of Man of Steel. Does this acknowledgement of the level of carnage retroactively improve Man of Steel? Also, what did you think of the trailer? Are you excited for Batman vs. Superman? Does the acknowledgement of the level of carnage retroactively improve Man of Steel? No. Am I excited for Batman vs. Superman? No. I hope it's good. I'll probably see it in the theater. I mean, I'll go see it. The fucking thing. They've got me. You know, I'm a Batman Superman fan for life. They're gonna get my money at least once. But no, I'm not excited for it. Bishop Feathers, lightning round question. Steve, 1, were you ever picked last in gym? I probably was. I was never much of an athlete. There's not a particular experience that has like scarred me for life that I can think of, but I'm sure I was. 2, I always was picked last because I was antisocial and not athletic at all, and it was embarrassing and awkward. When they do this, the less popular or nerdy kids are humiliated and it messes their self-esteem. Do you think the gym teacher should let the kids decide, or should they decide the kids for the teams so that nobody feels left out and to be politically correct? No, I don't think it should be about political correctness. I don't think stopping kids from feeling alienated and picked on is politically correct. I think it's just decent and compassionate. And I would recommend it for that reason. You know, I mean, on something like recess or something, of course, you know, kids pick their own teams, they can play, they can do whatever they want. But for like a structured activity where you're playing basketball for the class that day, I think it's probably better all around if you just select the teams as the teacher and just eliminate that, you know, okay, I guess we'll take Steve, you know. Just cut that part out. Because, I mean, some people can handle it and some people can't. And why give a kid some kind of a traumatic, scarring experience if you don't have to? Just my thoughts. Anyway, that's it for the questions. Before I get out of here, I'm going to do a shout-out. The shout-out this week goes to a really cool channel that is starting to pick up some steam, which I'm really happy to see. It's the YouTube channel of Tom Leeds. Tom the Atheist. His main series is the Atheist On series, where he takes on a variety of topics, both of interest particularly to the atheist community, but also to politics and society and pop culture and things like that. And they're short videos, a couple minutes long. He's a really nice guy. He seems like just a level-headed, open-minded, just nice, pleasant guy to listen to for atheist-related content. He's just one of the nice guys, one of the genuinely nice, pleasant guys in our community. And I like him, and I recommend him to you, Tom Leeds. Check out his YouTube channel. And I'm recommending his personal channel, but he also has a show on Secular TV's channel called One Old White Guy, which is great, which is a wonderful idea where he's the one old white guy, and he interviews people from the atheist community who are women, who are people of color. He just started it. He's only done 2 episodes so far, but it's a wonderful idea for a show, and I highly recommend that you check that out too. So there you go, Tom Leeds. Good guy. Don't forget, by the way, to listen to the Lemme Listen podcasts. I'm on those. I do a podcast every other week with the fabulous Jason Harding, the puppet master of Opinionville. We do a movie review podcast called Late Seating. Our most recent episode is up right now. We review Logan's Run, if you're interested to hear what we have to say about that. It's such a fun show. I look forward to doing it. It's one of my favorite things that I've ever done, this movie review podcast with Jason. So check it out. Please listen to it on SoundCloud.com/Lemme Listen. And you can also listen to Jason's other podcasts that he produces. He does like 50 of them now. There's Lemme Finish. There's American Monsters and How to Destroy Them, which is awesome. Check out the Lemme Listen podcasts. SoundCloud.com/Lemme Listen. And leave a comment on this video for next time. Ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly. Leave your question for next time in the comments to this video, and I will answer as many of your questions next time as I possibly can. So until next time, take care, everybody.